Have you ever considered adoption?
Today, we're going to interview Moses Sunseri, our son, and his journey of adoption from birth to adulthood. And we know the insights you receive in this podcast will help you understand better the beauty and the challenges of adoption.
Well, this is our son, Moses Sunseri. His name actually was Lipti Rath. When he was 2 weeks old, we got his picture and we got, first we got his little paperwork, and they asked if we wanted to adopt this baby from Cambodia. We had already sent in our paperwork. It had been, we sent it in February and we got this in August. And of course, we didn't have a picture of him then. We just had just a little paper of how big he was, how much he weighed. And so we said yes, of course we said yes. From there, we started preparing, and on Thanksgiving Day of 1999, we flew out to Cambodia and got Moses. He was 3.5 months old. He was 7 pounds, 11 ounces. So he's very, very tiny.
So it's been quite a journey,
Yes.
and we wanted to do a podcast on really helping parents who have adopted or are adopting and to be able to get some insight into the process and the challenges and the beauty and the joy. So wanted to interview you, Moses. And first question I had for you is, how old were you when you realized that you were adopted, and what was that like for you?
It was pretty early on. I'd say about as soon as I could start understanding, about 4 or 5, I'd see all kinds of other kids in kindergarten. The parents would pick them up, or even in pre-K, and their parents would pick them up. I was like, wow, these kids look like their parents, same color and everything. I was like, what happened to me? And I was like, I'm not even remotely close. I'm not even the same color. And so I was like, Mom, Dad, why do I look different? Why is there so many other people that don't look like me? And that's when they told me. I mean, they were pretty straightforward. Moses, you're adopted. And that means we took you in, and you weren't ours originally, but you're ours now.
Well, some advice that we were given early on, which I think was really good advice, was to not keep the adoption a secret, but to always explain to him at the level that he could understand that he was adopted. And HollyKem has always honored the gift of his mom giving him up to give us a chance, and have always told Moses that story. But then, as you move through elementary school and your childhood, all kids have their own issues. We all do, because we're human. But what would you say, Moses, were some challenges that you had in your childhood in regard to adoption?
As far as, I'd say, 4th, 5th grade, everybody would be like, well, you don't look like your parents. Which one of your parents is black, or which one of your parents is Mexican? And I was like, well, I'm Asian. And neither of them. It was always stuff like that where they were just confused. People were confused, and I was young, so I didn't quite know how to explain it to them either. I was adopted. Some other people had me, and my parents took over from there because my original parents could no longer care for me in the way that they'd like to. I guess it was challenging saying that myself, because I was like, why couldn't my original parents take care of me? Like, were they even good people? were they married? I don't know. And that's crazy to me, because my parents could have not even been parents. They could have just been, placeholders, I guess. They might have not have been a happy family. That's always been a tough thing with me, to know if my parents were all good, did I leave on good terms, or was I just taken?
Is that something that you thought about a lot, or was it just every once in a while?
Early on, I thought about it a good bit, but not as much as you would think. But I always had a challenging day on August 22nd. I didn't quite realize why, but I understand now. So I usually have a good day on that day. But it was when I was put up for adoption, and I always had some kind of sickness or bad day on that day. And I guess that had to do with the adoption, that, sometimes you have conflicts dealing with adoption that you don't even know is from adoption.
What happened was, when Moses was 4 days old, the story that we received was that his mother was sick and couldn't care for him. And so she placed him in a center, which was an orphanage in Phnom Penh. He was from a very small village, about an hour and a half away. And in that, she got to request where Moses would be adopted to. So she requested America. She requested that he have a mom and a dad. She wanted him to have a mom and a dad. And that was really, he has other siblings, they said, but that was all that we knew. So in that process, he was born on August 18th and he went to the orphanage on August 22nd. So every year on the 21st, he would cry, he would be very upset, he'd be very scared, never want to go to school when it was school time. And Dean and I both being therapists, it took me about 24 hours to figure out what was happening. And when Moses was 1 year old and I told him his story, even though he was 1 year old, was the only thing that got him to quit crying. And so we knew then that he was having what's called body memories. So as Moses started to grow, we started to integrate how to help him and take care of that until he had some intellectual understanding and give him more information through that. So there's just been different things that we've done to keep him emotionally safe and help him understand. And what I was going to go back to earlier is that what we did when of course, people would, if I was with Moses, especially me, not Dean as much, they'd say, your husband's dark. And I'm like, well, he kind of actually is, but my child's Asian. So, my child's from Cambodia and he's adopted. So Moses would even say when he could talk, he said, I adopted. He was always told, and still to this day, that he was very special, that his mother loved him more than I ever could love him, that she gave him a life to make sure he was safe and secure because his country had just come out of war. And she wanted to make sure that he had everything that she couldn't give him. And I always said, I don't know if I could love Moses that much or that I could give him away. I know I couldn't. I am internally always grateful to his mother for that.
Yeah, and I think that what we understood early on, that actually emotional memory can be carried in the body that's non-conscious, that's non-rational, and that this cyclical time that came up was actually a very turbulent time for Moses. So once we recognized that, we had a better idea of how to navigate that through him. And so we were very intentional about communicating how much we wanted him, because we know that, part of the wound of adoption is that there's a relationship built between the mother and the child. I mean, the child, even though it's non-rational, they understand the heartbeat, they understand the voice, they understand there's levels of connection, perhaps after they're born, the smell or whatever. And that when that's ruptured, that's marked on a child. And so how do we parent as best we can to be sensitive to that and also to validate that? And then also have somewhat of a plan of when that comes up to really try to do the best we can to help him heal from that rupture in some sense. And I guess that brings us to the next question. Is a teenager, Moses, your high school years, what were some of the challenges in those years that you had to deal with in regards to adoption?
Less challenging, but a little more complex. I knew how to answer most of the questions, so it didn't cause me much conflict. When you're adopted, you almost have to not take offense to being adopted, because a lot of people they try to hurt your feelings, like, well, Moses, you're adopted, And I'm like, yeah, well, I got adopted by a very loving family that probably loves me more than your family loves you. So, you were different, so they picked on you. But I learned to deal with that very quickly. I mean, it was always challenging, but it wasn't all that hard. My own internal thoughts, I always thought, I wonder what my other siblings were like. Because, I've been an only child for as long as I've known, for 23 years. So I don't know what it'd be like to have siblings or anything, but I don't think I could have dealt with a sibling. Fighting all the time. No, as a teenager, it was a lot easier to deal with because I knew how to deal with it. Not because people got any less hard on you. It's because I learned how to deal with it. If I had to say something about anybody that was adopted, just don't be offended by what you are.
Don't be offended by it. That's good. And then as a young adult, I mean, from transitioning from teenage to young adult, did you have any new complexities?
I have fun with being adopted now.
You
I have a
do.
lot of fun with being adopted. I'll have a friend over, and most of the time they'll think my friend is their kid, and I'm like, yeah, he's adopted. I'm part of the family. I enjoy being adopted, honestly. I like the confusion it brings sometimes, but I get to explain too, you know. I was adopted by a very good family. People always ask me what it's like. They're like, "Oh, you knew you were adopted?" I was like, "Yeah." It wasn't too hard to tell.
Y'all look alike. You and your mom look alike only when she laughs. You know?
Well, I was gonna say one little story I remember. I don't know if you remember, but I went to pick you up at school, and all the kids were staring at you. You might have been like in the third grade, and they were like, "That's your mom?" You said, "Yes, I look like my dad."
Yeah, and I use being adopted to my advantage, sometimes not in the right way, but you know, I get away with certain things that most kids couldn't get away with. I remember being in an airport and I didn't like what she was saying, so I said, "That she's sure not my mom."
We were in the mall and you were 2 years old and you wanted me to pick you up, and I had a handful of bags, and I was like, "No, Moses, mom can't pick you up right now. Hold my hand and we can walk." And you didn't want to walk, so you started screaming, "Where's my mom? Where's my mom?" And I was like, "Moses, stop, they're gonna take you away." And this woman stops and goes, "This little boy's lost." I said, "He's not lost, he's mine."
Well,
So at that moment, I was like, "Don't even dare try to tell me you're not intelligent."
the whole aspect of an international adoption is unique because here you are, you're 100% Khmer,
Yeah.
Cambodian, bring you to the South, and you live in rural Louisiana, Alabama for a while, rural Louisiana, and there's probably not another Cambodian within 100 miles of us. And I guess all of us, as we grow into our identity, there's a number of things that are part of that. Was that a challenge for you in trying to identify, like, who am I and how to identify ethnically what that is?
I think everybody grows up and they see what other people do and they become more like that. And you become more like what you're around. I went to private school my whole life and I saw a bunch of white country boys. That's what I became. I mean, I'm brown on the outside, but I'm pretty white on the inside. In the South, a lot of people are worried about racism and stuff. My parents are always worried about how people would treat me because I'm different. And in the beginning, I didn't really know how to take it. So I got a lot of sadness from being different. As I got older, I was like, oh, wow, I really like this hunting and fishing thing. I started to become like what I was hanging around with. And I'd say it's a lot easier. I mean, people worry about racism in the South, but it's really all about how you carry yourself. People take offense to different things, different levels. I don't take offense to much. When someone calls me brown or oh, you're Asian, you can't be embarrassed by what you are. I mean, if you're embarrassed by what you are, then you're just gonna have internal conflict with yourself. It's not because of other people, it's because of how you view yourself. So when people say you are brown or this and that, I'm like, yeah, I am brown. But the way I carry myself now, I mean, I'm treated very well as if I'm not different at all.
What advice would you give parents who have or are adopting?
I'd say to love them and reassure them that they're safe and that you're trying to take care of them rather than kid young if you do adopt. It'd just be easier. If you do adopt in their teens, you got to make sure you're prepared. You can't just go into it willy-nilly and think it's all going to be okay because for the most part it won't. They're hard. It's harder because at that point you're just a stranger. It's not like you grew up with them like I did with my parents. I mean, even being adopted young, I still had a hard time. So I mean, I can only imagine whenever you come from a bad home or and you're just older and you don't understand why you were let go, why some other person's taking care of you. Most of the time, you're thinking someone's only giving you that to take advantage of you in some sort of way. So you just got to be mentally prepared. I'd say probably see a professional.
Do you think adoption's a good idea, and why?
I used to not think it was a good idea. I always dealt with, oh, my parents left me. Why'd they do that? And I was angry. I was like, I'd rather have not gone on than have a parent that just rejected me in the beginning. But as I'm getting older, I'm like, whether she loved me enough to give me up or she just gave me up, I mean, she gave me a better life. a chance. You know, that's what a lot of people don't get nowadays, especially. Some kids don't even get a chance, even in America. I mean, I was fortunate enough to be in Cambodia and have a chance. I mean, I literally had little to no chance of success. They take you out of the orphanage really young if no one adopts you and you just have to work, live on the streets. I was very fortunate.
Well, speaking for myself, I'm really proud of you. You know, you've really turned into a young man in so many different ways that bring joy to my heart. The ability to connect with people. I mean, I think part of your adoption story has enabled you to be able to connect with a lot of different people that are different, and that you certainly understand that. And also, you really have a strong stand in your values, the things that you believe in. You don't compromise, and you stand strong. You know, so many things about you as seeing you growing up that has made me proud, and it's been a great honor to be your father. Yeah, you have anything?
Well, I was gonna say, you know, one of the things that's beautiful is that you have taken the love that God gave you and the people that God gave you, and you have truly flourished in that and received it. It's one thing to have an opportunity, it's another thing to seize it and to receive it. And you've done that, and you know who you are, and not that you don't have room to grow, we all do, but you have a sense of who you are. You're a leader and you go for it.
Well, I think the unique thing often for adoption is the whole family, not always, but usually the whole family has to deal with some levels of brokenness, right? Like you articulated the brokenness between you and birth mom. And, you know, for HollyKem and I, you know, we had a miscarriage, at least one. And, you know, we had to deal with the brokenness of not being able to conceive a natural baby. But it was out of that brokenness that we had this desire and this excitement around adopting. So it's interesting that in family systems, I think, look, we make it go, and we all have to deal with our own brokenness and how we deal with it, overcome it, and still rise above it to create family is really ideally what this is about. And on the flip side of that, if we stay stuck in our brokenness, then we don't get to enjoy the benefits and the fullness of what a family has to offer. And so I think in a lot of ways we've done that. I mean, certainly we're not perfect, and there's a lot of things that perhaps me or mom could have done differently.
Sure.
But at the same time, we made family, you know. Yeah. So tell us about the Oprah story.
Well, I tell everybody Oprah saved me. She had a show where she featured a woman who adopted a bunch of Chinese babies. And that's where my parents wanted to adopt from. They went to apply to see if they could get a Chinese baby, but everybody wanted a Chinese baby after the whole Oprah thing. So I was the next best country. So I tell everybody Oprah saved me. I think if I went knock on her door and told her that she saved me and I told her the story, she'd give me like a free TV or something.
So together we say, thank you, Oprah. Well, we appreciate you, Mo, joining us. And, you know, HollyKem and I have done a number of videos on parenting. And so if you want to grow in your parenting skills, we have a whole play set on parenting. And we encourage you right now to click on that, and we'll see you
In the next video.